Come to your senses, for the love of God. Shame on you! Shame on you!
If you want a snapshot of one of the most divisive issues that will decide this November's presidential election, this surely is it. A solitary middle-aged man screaming through a fence.
A 10-week-old baby in the womb. These are human beings who deserve the right to be alive.
As pro-choice protesters stand on guard alongside a bus offering pills to women to abort unwanted pregnancies.
Freedom? This is the land of the free. And free to decide for abortion if you need one.
To cap it all, the scene is playing out in the shadow of the Democrats' National Convention here in Chicago.
Growing up, I was an all-American girl.
Where a young woman last night brought delegates to tears with her powerful story.
I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. At age 12, I took my first pregnancy test, and it was positive.
This is Hadley Duvall at age 12, the week she took that test. She decided to go public with her story years later after the Supreme Court struck down a woman's right to choose.
To tell a 12-year-old girl she must have the baby of her stepfather who raped her is unthinkable.
A political ad followed that would instantly catapult her onto the national stage, even onto chat shows with Kamala Harris.
You are doing such important work to be a voice because...
Especially since Hadley's Republican state of Kentucky had banned abortion with no exception for rape or incest. I can't imagine the trauma. Hadley told me her stepfather began sexually abusing her when she was 5 years old.
I remember as a child, I would wake up in my room and I would check the time, and if it was a certain time, I would feel my anxiety lessen a little bit because I knew past a certain time of the night I was safe. If he hadn't gotten up yet, he wasn't going to.
Hadley was too scared to tell anyone, even about the pregnancy, which ended in a miscarriage. Had it not, though, she knows that in Kentucky now, girls like her, or any woman, could not have an abortion, which is why she's speaking out. How did you get the strength to come out and tell your story?
Little me never gave up on me, so I can't really give up on her. You know, she really did the hardest part. And being able to continue to lift up that story and let out the screams that we're internally trapped in for so long.
Does it feel like you're doing that when you tell your story?
Absolutely, it's so healing, and it's so healing to know that I love flipping votes, don't get me wrong, I love changing people's minds, love it so much, but there's nothing I love more than making a survivor feel heard. We hear you.
She's talking about votes because Hadley is now part of Team Harris, using her story and women's rights as a weapon to try and beat Donald Trump in November.
Kamala Harris will sign a national law to restore the right to an abortion.
Since the fall of Roe v. Wade, 22 US states have enacted strict laws that drastically limit a woman's right to choose. In Hadley's home state of Kentucky, a majority Republican government has banned abortion outright, except in extreme medical emergencies, with no exceptions for rape or incest. Similar draconian bans are in place across 13 other states, and abortion is limited to under 18 weeks in many more. Which is why the state of Illinois, which is pro-choice, is so critical, a sanctuary amid a sea of red. Illinois, of course, home to Chicago, where the Democrats and doctors are making that exact point.
America is one of the very few places in the globe right now that is going backwards in terms of access to abortion. You know, I wish I had the answer for why it got that way. You know, I certainly can say that one of the problems is that we have allowed abortion to become a political issue and not a healthcare issue.
Why are you helping these butchers of humanity?
But abortion is a political issue, and potentially the political issue that could decide the next president.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting, and we'll speak to her later in the programme. But let's talk more now about this issue to Roxane Gay, a feminist scholar, social commentator and author whose latest ebook is Stand Your Ground, a black feminist reckoning with America's gun problem. Roxane, it's good to have you on the programme. Tell me, to what extent do you think this election is about gender?
It's, we are not single issue people who live single issue lives. And so voters are going to be contending with a range of issues. But gender is going to be one of the foremost issues because women and people with uteruses in this country want to have bodily autonomy. We want to be able to make our own private healthcare decisions without the state intervening. And the Republicans under Trump have decided that they know best what women want, which there are so many reasons why they don't. And so women are going to be voting with that in mind this year.
Sure, and what really struck me about the Republican National Convention a few weeks ago in Milwaukee was that Trump made no bones about, this sort of what some people would describe toxic masculinity. It was all about men who felt left behind, men who felt pushed into a corner. It's astonishing that they would have gone for that when they know that that really just appeals to half the country.
It is astonishing, particularly because not all men feel that way. And it's really interesting that they can only seem to legislate from a place of grievance rather than considering potential and possibility. And that makes for a very restrictive politic, and it doesn't really serve anyone. But they seem to be doubling and tripling down on this idea that if they appeal to male grievance, that somehow everything is going to be okay, when literally half of this country, half of our world, is comprised of women. And our rights and our decisions and our needs matter. And women are also dealing with economic challenges. We're also dealing with wondering about the value of our college degrees, et cetera. These are not issues that are strictly the purview of men.
America was, in its infancy, a country founded on an idea, on a revolutionary idea. And you could argue that ideas have sort of got lost in the kind of forest of politics in recent years. Do you see ideas coming back here? Is there imagination in this particular election campaign?
There is. I actually recently wrote about how I think Kamala Harris is bringing back political imagination. This country was founded on political imagination, and granted that imagination was fairly limited because it was only for a certain group of people. But for the first time in this very long election cycle, we're starting to talk about ideas. We're starting to talk about policy instead of just Biden's age or Trump's dementia. And so it's really great. And it's important. We should not be just slinging mud and talking about human characteristics. We should be talking about how these leaders plan to actually lead and how their leadership decisions are going to affect our lives.
And yet whenever I travel outside big cities or even some big cities and I speak to Republicans, I hear this thing over and over again. They feel that when Democrats talk about imagination, when they talk about their ideas, they're talking down to Republicans. Do you think that's true, and what can be done about that?
I don't think that's true. I think they really have to sit with why they feel that way, why they think talking about equity and equality is talking down, because we're actually just talking about how we can lift everyone up. And a lot of times what Republicans are talking about is how they can hoard whatever resources they have and gain more. Now, there are all kinds of Republicans. They are as diverse as any other political group. And I do think we would have a better political climate if we could figure out how to have productive conversations across the proverbial aisle. But under Trump, the Republican Party has warped into something unrecognizable. And I think a lot of real sort of authentic Republicans would agree that this does not represent what they believe in. And I think they need to look within themselves first and figure out how to clean up their own house before they worry about how Democrats talk to them. I mean, how their own leader is talking to them.
Okay. Roxane Gay, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.